So you have something in your mind, and that is what gives you what you think reality is that. Now, if your map of reality is wrong, obviously you're going to make wrong decisions. Now, for Pakistani decision makers generally, the influence is as follows. First, that India is a civilizational foe. Now, there's a big difference between a foe, an enemy, and a civilization foe. France and Germany were at war for centuries, but they were not civilizational foes as such. Here, the assumption is that this is something which can never go right. They are civilization foes. The second one is that Hindus are not good fighters. It's a strange assumption because, Gurkhas, everybody acknowledges in Pakistan too are good fighters. Rajputs are supposed to be good fighters, Sikhs, etc. But this is what is said. And people make decisions on the basis of this, and that's why the decisions go wrong. India is a hegemon, should be this. Of course, India is huge, 6 times larger, and you know more about the economic power than I do. But resistance at on every front means more and more distance, and the possibility of peace and friendship therefore decreases. And of course, Kashmir should be one. Optimism and group think. When you are sitting in a place where decisions are being made, it's difficult to say no. Everyone in the group is saying something else. For a war, it's much more difficult because then you'll be branded as a coward also. So it's much more difficult. And I have quoted Arthur Schellinger, Jr., Special Assistant to John F. Kennedy, President of the US, how he writes about it, how he kept quiet during the decision for the Bay of Pigs. It was a disastrous decision, but he couldn't say it over there. So that sort of thing, and it happens. And I don't know whether you would agree with me that if there's a glass of water and it's half of it only, you'd probably say it's good to say that it's half full. Life goes on like that, you'd feel better and so on. Psychologists tell us to think like this. It is positive thinking. But for generals, it is disastrous. Because if a general doesn't call it half empty, the general is going to make a wrong decision. That they've got the weakest link in the chain is the one which is going to break. So generals generally do that. They are more optimistic than they should be. They generally predict short wars, many of them. Afghanistan, Ukraine. Ukraine one is not sure because it's possibly Putin and not the generals. Because I don't think a military officer would agree to crossing the Dnieper River in March when the water melts and then you've got to make bridges. The engineer effort is going to be far more. So about that one is not sure, but Vietnam, India's forward policy in 1962, there was a big disaster because India moved forward and then China moved ahead, etc. And then finally they fired a General Call, etc. They examined that decision, they fired General Cole and so on. So for generals to be optimistic, not to be realistic, let's say, is actually wrong. Okay, I've used the term clique in this book, and this is a term which I should explain. By clique, I mean a group which, though some members of it might have been the most important de jure officers of the state, they might have held them. Nevertheless, they made decisions about war and peace in covert, clandestine, extra-legal ways without consulting others, equally de jure stakeholders, or going through the procedures and offices constituted by the state. So that is what I mean by clique. And the thesis which I present here is that our wars have been made by cliques, mostly of military officers, but also sometimes of civilians. The gambling model, of course, this is a metaphor. I've used the term for taking excessive risks. The decision makers of a state, civilian or military, initiate or permit the initiation of hostile acts by the regular army, civil armed forces, volunteers, non-state actors towards any other state. Please. It would lead to, on the assumption that it would not lead to an all-out war, which may pose an existential threat to the nation state. Then this is called the decision-making model is that of taking undue risks, inordinate risks, excessive risks, and perhaps the term gambling may be used for it. Okay, now I'm going to come to specific wars. I'm giving this map of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir, so that you know that actually it is not one state. The state is Jammu, where the Maharaja's base is, and the Maharaja is Dogra, Rajput Hindu, but the rest is either area which the Maharaja's ancestors have bought, like the Vale of Kashmir, or conquered, or just entered into because there were less people there, and they have different. This is going to have repercussions later. Okay, and this is what I was getting at. Percentage of religious communities in 1947 was Muslim 77.1%, Hindus 20.12% in the whole state, 1.64%, Buddhists 1.01%, others 1.12%. The Vale itself 93.48% Muslim. Now this, please keep this in mind because this has repercussions later. Let's look at this. In 1947, what was the policy? The policy was ambiguous. It was not stated in very clear terms. I mean, it wasn't that areas, states, not British India, states with a Hindu majority are straight away going to join India, and states with a Muslim majority are going to join Pakistan. That was not the policy. And on 13, it is also the words were such that some Rajas, Maharajas, and Nawabs thought they could be autonomous. So in a meeting of 13th June 1947, Sir Conrad Lawrence Corfield, the Crown Rep, said that particular political arrangements could imply relations with autonomous units. And Mr. Jinnah said that in his view, states were fully entitled to say whether they would join neither constituent assembly. Every Indian state was a sovereign state. Pandit Nehru said he differed altogether. Actually, Nehru's views was that the stated view was that the Nawabs, Rajas, and the rulers should not decide the future of the state. The future of the state should be decided by the people. Jinnah's stated view was that the rulers should decide. Mountbatten's stated view was that where there was a dispute, there the people should be asked. These were the three stated views. In fact, there was a scramble for the states, naked scramble from both sides, because otherwise, the accession, Yaqub Bangas has written a book about it, and so on. Jinnah asked, for instance, the Maharaj of Jodhpur to join Pakistan. The Maharaj of Jodhpur was Hindu, the people were Hindu also, right? But he did. Jinnah also once tried to get Hyderabad, Bhopal, Rampur. The rulers were Muslim, but the people were Hindu to join Pakistan. He also asked, and this time he succeeded in asking the Nawab of Junagadh to join Pakistan. He did, whereas the people were mostly Hindu. So it wasn't a case of, and it was not just Jinnah. What actually then transpired was that power was used. India basically conquered Hyderabad, right? And it's true that the Nizam was Muslim and the people were mostly Hindu, but basically they conquered there. And there are papers in the archives which show that actually a lot of killing did take place there also. So in Kalat, the Khan had declared independence. For some days, he was allowed to remain like that. Then the Pakistan army came in, Pasni, etc., and the Khan straight away immediately surrendered, joined Pakistan. His brother ran away to Afghanistan, but he also came back later. So it was a case of who gets power where. In Kashmir, what happened was that exact opposite case to that of Junagadh, the ruler being a Hindu and the people being Muslim, exact opposite. The ruler acceded to India. Now there are several, agreements and disagreements as to when he actually did. Lamb, for instance, says that on the evening in which he was supposed to the Indian army entered that morning, but the Maharaja had not signed the treaty of accession because the plane did not go there. So it is possible that there was a 12-hour delay or something. That is very much possible. But the Maharaja had accepted it, and why he did so is because troops had entered, armed tribesmen had entered his state. Here I'd like to clarify that what is called Azad Kashmir had not been won over by the tribesmen. Here, local people had risen up, and the political body which was prominent here, which was popular, was the Muslim Conference. So local people had won it, and therefore this has nothing to do with the tribesmen. This is the local people who were fed up with the Maharaja's rule. They won it. So they have a right of their own. The other state, which is now Indian administered Kashmir, there the tribesmen tried to win over, but non-state actors, but did not succeed. So they began a war in which there was a lot of murder and rapine and fire and so on, but they did not succeed, and the Indian army pushed them back. Okay, you can ask questions later. This was Mountbatten's view. He says that I told Nehru on the 24th of June, 1947, he said that he had come back from Kashmir. He advised the Maharaja and Pandit Ramchandra Kak that so far as possible, they should consult the will of the people to do what was best for the state. By the way, when the instrument of Kashmir's accession came to Mountbatten, he wrote on it, according to the will of the people. The instrument itself, the original copy is lost, but he was the one who wrote this, and this is something Indians blame him for. Well, anyway, basically, as I said before, everyone wanted a strong line. In some places succeeded, in others it didn't. Sardar Patel, for instance, wanted to adopt a strong line, and strong line meant military action. In the state of Junagadh, Mountbatten argued as follows. I pointed out that if a strong line included entering Junagadh, that means Pakistan, then instead of defeating Mr. Jinnah would have defeated us. For surely it was exactly what he wanted, that we should fall into the trap of committing a senseless act of war, for which he could hold us before the United Nations. So then a more nuanced way was adopted. A provisional government was formed, and voting was done, and of course they voted for India. So that was his way of doing things. You can ask me more about it later. I'm coming to the important point of the clique deciding to fight a war. Mr. Jinnah was the head of this clique, by the way. Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan was next, so they all knew. There are many proofs of this. Mr. Jinnah's own words to Field Marshal Sir Claude Auchinleck, but I'm not quoting them. There's not enough time to quote everything. There is this diary, Cunningham's diary. Cunningham's diary is, he writes on 29th October 1947, I pointed out that until 4 or 5 days ago, I did not even know whether the entry of my tribe into Kashmir was in accordance with his, that is the Jinnah's and Liaqat's policy, and that my last orders were that we were not supposed to allow the tribesmen to go in. If this was his definite policy, Jinnah's definite policy, then I was quite prepared to support it, provided I didn't have to do one thing and say something else. If I were to do this, Jinnah must face and risk risk that the cooperation of some of my officer and with the tribesmen would become known and might be condemned by world opinion. In other words, they were fighting this war through non-state actors. They had not told, they had not acted like a state. And why Abu Wala Maududi Saab actually did not call it jihad was because there are certain Quranic, ayat and orders about it. One of them says that the previous treaties must be cancelled and that war should be declared. Previous treaties had not been cancelled, war had not been declared, and therefore Maududi opposed it. Allama Shabir Ahmad Osmani didn't. He chose other reasons for it. I can't go in details here. There's not time, but I've got it in my previous book, Interpretations of Jihad in South Asia. What were the consequences of this Kashmir war? Well, armed forces officers, at least some of them, lost faith in the civilian leadership. A big consequence, which haunts us still today. They blamed it for ending the war. I mean, I've got some names, M.K. Janjua, General Akbar Khan, etc., but many of them, actually. General Musa is on record as having lost faith in the government too. A clique ordered the tribal raid and the decision was never examined. The decision that non-state actors, should they be used or not? And inordinate risks were taken. Let's go to the next war, which is the 1965 war, in which the same thing was done. Once again, plausible deniability, that you fight a war through, this time, military people, but dressed up as, not in uniform and on leave, so to speak. According to General Mitta, between 1956 and 1960, at least 4 files recommending that we should attack Kashmir and stating that Kashmiris would rise in revolt were sent to me by the chief. Chief means Ayub Khan, for my views. Captain Gohar Ayub, who was the chief's ADC, used to bring the files to me. Every time my answer was a definite no. And the chief always accepted my advice. In view of this, I have not been able to understand how he was persuaded to agree to Operation Gibraltar. Well, there may be reasons. One of the reasons is that possibly this skirmish in the run of Kutch, this is the area in which the water comes in, then the water goes out. So no man's land really, but Indian troops used to go around here and Pakistani troops too. There was a skirmish. Pakistani troops apparently did better. And Ayub Khan translated that or understood that, perceived that as victory. And also he reached this conclusion that the Pakistan army man-to-man is better than the Indian army. And that is one possibility. The other one was the Hazrat Bal incident in which some people rose in a revolt. But then that to think that everyone would, that was obviously a mistake, which was proved to be wrong later. So anyway, this is how it was. Here was a clique again. Mr. Bhutto was two civilian members of it, Mr. Bhutto and Mr. Aziz Ahmad. Mr. Bhutto was foreign minister. Aziz Ahmad was foreign secretary. Mr. Bhutto said that India will never cross the international border. And Ayub believed him. Of course, the person who was in charge of planning itself was General Akhtar Malik, and he is known to be a very competent officer by everyone, by Pakistanis as well as Indians. So this was probably the 13th of May 1965 when, according to Altaf Gohar, Ayub listened to General Akhtar Malik and Murray about the same plan which he had rejected before, now called Operation Gibraltar. According to Musa, he pointed to Akhnur and asked Malik, why don't you go for Akhnur also? This version is corroborated by Altaf Gohar, who adds that General Malik said it would cost more money. Ayub sanctioned the extra cost. The assault on Akhnur was called Grand Slam. But Akhnur involved a transgression of the international border. As Gohar says facetiously as a joke, perhaps the Indians would not notice the minor transgression of the international boundary. I'll show you a map just to make this clear. Here it is. So as you can see, this area is called the Chicken's Neck, right? Right. And this is where, in any case, I mean, apart from that, Jodia and Akhnur, this Akhnur was considered by India as part of their Kashmir. and it opened the way then forward to Jammu and so on. And General Akhtar Malik knew about it, as he wrote in a letter of his to his brother, General Abdul Ali Malik, then at that time brigadier. So he was very clear about it. He was a military officer. He should have known. And he should also have known that no matter what Bhutto is saying, would India actually allow all this to happen? Wouldn't they take some steps? But apparently they didn't. So on the, strangely enough, the Indian commander-in-chief did not order this attack, although Jodia was under tremendous pressure. And had it not been the 24-hour, delay when the change of command took place from General Akhtar Malik, the command was given to General Yahya Khan, Jodia might have fallen. But anyway, the Indian commander-in-chief didn't order an action. It was the Prime Minister who ordered the action, Lal Bahadur Shastri. He ordered the commander-in-chief because their assumption too was that we should not cross the international boundary. Their forces too, after this, the run of Kutch, they had decided to send the forces were away from the borders, and both India and Pakistan. I don't know. I have not found the answers in any of the documents which I have consulted, or any of the person I've asked. General Bakhtiar Rana is no more. He was the corps commander. Most of the officers at that time who would know such things have died. But I don't know why they were not on the border. And I do not know why the Indians were not on the border either. So they rushed on the morning of 6th of September, 1965. They rushed to the border. They hadn't eaten much and they hadn't slept for about 24 hours or so, both armies. Okay, so who won the war? Nobody. According to General Mahmood Ahmad, who is the author of an excellent book on 1965, but somehow nobody knows. It is not found anywhere. So it's nobody's fault. Pakistan's aims are as follows. In case of Pakistan, if it was the solution of Kashmir, then we failed. If it was merely to defreeze the issue, then the means employed and the risks taken were grossly disproportionate to the results achieved. In the case of Indians, if their aim was to save IHK by attacking Pakistan, they succeeded, but at a cost disproportionate to their gains. If their aim was to capture Sialkot, Lahore, or Kusur, then they too failed totally. If their aim was to cause attrition to Pakistani armed forces, then the Indians suffered no less than us. Actually, Lahore, Sialkot, etc., they didn't really want to capture because I've read the books by which have given plans by the Indian generals. So that wasn't the plan. The plan was to save Kashmir, and in that, what happened? They managed to do it. Okay, what are the consequences? One of the major consequences, which you ought to know very well, and Sartaj Sahib has written about it, was the slowing down of the economy and Rostov's stages. Not that I know much about them, but what little I know is that Pakistan was set to be to become, so to speak, an Asian tiger, so to take off, so to speak. That didn't happen. That slowed down. So that is one consequence. It's very well known, written about it, and I'm sure you know better than myself. The other one is that the Bengalis felt they were left undefended and became more alienated from West Pakistan, because actually they said there's not enough force to save us. If the Indians wanted to attack us, well, they could have done it. But this attack, now that we know, we've got the sources. The Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri had stopped. He said, "Don't attack East Pakistan." Pakistan moved closer to China and the Arab world and away from the West. Pakistan moved towards the religious, political, and cultural right. I don't know if anybody from that time, except myself and Dr. Nadeem ul-Haq, are there. I think even Dr. Nadeem ul-Haq is younger than I am. So Gandhi, Ashoka, etc. were taught at that time. And they were no longer taught. We became more narrow-minded, more prejudiced, more intolerant. Now, whether that's a good thing or not, that's up to you to decide. But the fact that it happened, one of the reasons for that is this loss of confidence in the self, in the national self, so to speak, in the 1965 war. Let's go to the next one. I'm giving this map just to show you how that this is surrounded on all sides from India. The consequence of this we'll mention later. Now, before this slide comes, actually, I'd like to say something. There's so many people. Ronak Jahan has written about the fact that the jute used to be sold and the money would come in, and that money was invested in West Pakistan in order to build up Islamabad and Lahore and so on and so forth. That, of course, the economic aspects, I'm sure you know very well. The political aspects also, I've written about them in my book on language and politics in Pakistan, that there were very few people from Bengal who were in the real structure of power. Okay, so that too. But there's one aspect which I have written in this book, which has not been written in other books, and I don't think this has been written by other people. And that is that there was a sort of racism and very offensive racism, which was practiced every day, sometimes as a joke, which is not a joke, and sometimes in real earnest. Bengalis were called chota, kala, and things like this. And when this happens, someone calls you mota, chota, kala, or ugly or something like this, it stays in your mind, in the crypts of your being. It acts like a corrosive poison, and you get angry and you want to take revenge. So this is something which has not been written about, but anyway, it was there. This racism was there. So it was not that East Pakistan was treated only as a colony. It was also treated as the kind of colony in which the colonizing power actually, makes fun of those who are colonized, so to speak. Well, here is the military action of the night of the 26th March. Officer A, what do you think would be the approximate number of casualties of the university? Just give me an approximate number in your view. What will be the number killed, wounded, or captured? Just give me a rough figure. And the officer says, this is a junior officer, says 88, approximately 300. Well done, 300 killed. Anybody wounded, captured? 88, I believe only in one thing, it's 300 killed, over. 88, yes, I agree with you. That's much easier, nothing asked, nothing done. You don't have to explain anything. Well, once again, well done. And for this, I've got, Bose's dead reckoning, because Pakistanis generally think that Bose is more reliable than others, because she says that the figure which Mujib gave, 3 million killed, is wrong. Perhaps Bose is right about it, but Bose has also written this. Okay. The levels of commitment were very high. And remember that soon after this, after the military action, the EPR and the EBR rebelled, East Pakistan Rifles and East Bengal Regiment. And it was then that they took the lives of many West Pakistani officers, and their wives and daughters were also raped. Some West Pakistani students who were studying were raped. So that did happen. Nobody is denying it. But the fact is that from that time onward, this was crushed by middle April. From that time onward, up to 15 December 1971, the Bengalis were oppressed in every way, tortured, humiliated, and so on, while Mukti Bahani was being trained in India. So the level of commitment was very much. I just want to bring this to you. And once again, I've chosen in this Siddiq Saleh, so that there is the evidence comes from a Pakistani. A Bengali boy arrested for an attempt of sabotage was brought before army officers. He refused to divulge any information, and the major put his stun gun to his chest, threatening to shoot him. The boy, according to Siddiq Saleh, bowed down, kissed the ground, stood up, and said, "I'm ready to die now. My blood will certainly hasten the liberation of my sacred land." Saleh does not write what happened to the boy. I've chosen the other side also. On the other side, Pakistani Razakar, overpowered by Bengali opponents, continued shouting Pakistan Zindabad till he was violated to death. So, I mean, the commitment civil war. It was terrible, but obviously many more Bengalis were killed. And right now, rape is something which is difficult to write about. The numbers I don't know, but for me, just one rape is enough. I mean, but anyway, I've got newspaper reports because when I took interviews, etc., then people would talk about trenches with Bengali women, etc. Most of the interviews I took, I went twice to Bangladesh, were printed later. Those are there, but let's look at this. According to newspaper reports, between 25,000, 195,000 pregnancies, 3,000 babies were born. Many women, however, aborted their babies, and some were adopted by people outside the country. Many women simply disappeared without any report at all. Many West Pakistani women, including wives of West Pakistani students, were also raped by Bengalis. I'm not saying that two things are equal, but I'm just giving figures that there it is. Now, so many pregnancies do not mean that all of them were rapes, but nevertheless, it's very difficult to get figures otherwise. Mujib's figures are probably exaggerated, but then the low figures given by the Pakistani reports are also, they're too low. So the truth must be something in between. That there was an atmosphere of even senior officers not caring enough, that is certainly there. That there were some officers who actually stopped their soldiers from raping, etc., that is also true, and I have written about that also. Okay. Was the Western Front also what I've called gambling in this book? Well, the military doctrine at that time was the defense of East Pakistan lies in West Pakistan. The idea was that if you attack from West Pakistan, India will commit its forces towards West Pakistan, East Pakistan will be left free, and so that was the report. In theory, yes. In practice, this was opposed by many military officers, especially in East Pakistan. Brigadier Sadullah, otherwise supposed to be a very brave officer, he was against it too. He said that this will not happen. So you're going to commit your troops there. We're going to be left of any possible help or troops or weapons here. And the Indians have got special kind of regiments for us. We're not going to have an easy time after this. Indira Gandhi actually had already ordered a war on the 4th of December. Yahya Khan preempted it. Deepidhar said to Indira, she was on the plane at that time, the fool had done exactly what one expected. Why? If you have in your mind, look at the map of East Pakistan in your minds once again. Now, let me do it because I might get it this time. Okay, right. Now, you see, if you put cannons over here, you can fire 20 miles inside India. So they sent their infantry 20 miles inside Pakistan, East Pakistan. By the 22nd of December, the infantry was engaged. Here, one armored unit was also engaged. Chua Gacha, I think was its name, etc. One armored unit, I think, in Pakistan. I don't remember the name, but but remember, aeroplanes could not be used because war had not been declared. Right? Once Yahya Khan on the 3rd declared war, which would have been declared by Indira Gandhi on the 4th anyway, aeroplanes were immediately used, which meant that these, here were some, these aeroplanes, and they could no longer take off because after 3 days they were put out of action. It was destroyed. The place from where they take off, runways. The runways were destroyed. That is why some people would consider this also a case of taking excessive risk, gambling. Now, I've told you about Indira Gandhi's attack. Very many people write that Indira Gandhi had it in mind and she was the one who was planning it. That's not true. No document bears this out. Indira Gandhi was actually amazed when Raw put it to her and other people. But she did not order any immediate action from East Pakistan, former East Pakistan. The officers who reached out to India have written their own account. And they said, initially, we will just given a few useless kind of rifles and nothing at all. Later on, India warmed up. And then India's, Indira Gandhi in April held a meeting in which she asked Manekshaw, who was then general. And Manekshaw, revealed this later. He was talking to young people, and perhaps maybe an old field marshal has a right to show off a little bit when there are young people there. But that's how he put it. He said it was in April, and I said, the Prime Minister said, General, I want you to enter East Pakistan. So I said, Madam Prime Minister, do you know that means war? So she said, yes. So he said, Madam Prime Minister, you must find another commander-in-chief for yourself. Now, I don't know whether he actually said this or not. But then he says that I asked her for time. Indira Gandhi said, okay. When he sat with her, she said, Madam Prime Minister, do you know there's going to be a monsoon? The tanks are going to get bogged down. We are not prepared. If you want me to fight now, can't be done. If you want me to fight in November or December, 100% victory, I can assure you. So the Prime Minister said, take up to December. That is how it happened. So she did plan this. Meanwhile, of course, Mukti Bhati were trained, but it was not immediately, it was not before the military action began. Right. Okay, so what were the consequences? It was the most brutal civil full-fledged war, leaving casualties among Bengalis, Biharis, West Pakistanis, Indians. PTSD and mental suffering is incalculable. I've got so many accounts, although the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not used in most cases. And Indira Gandhi became more tyrannical as the military victory was attributed to her, and one cause for her, choosing to dismiss Farooq Abdullah and lording it over Kashmir as well, and putting her own party in Kashmir as well, etc. And then the consequences in 1989, and then the uprising in Kashmir, etc., could be attributed to Indira Gandhi's own frame of mind after this. Pakistan turned more to China, the Arab world, and away from the West. Pakistan ignored the civil war, blaming India for aggressive warfare as a premeditated conspiracy. Even now, Pakistani books to students don't teach this. They only call it, if they at all discuss it, it's a paragraph saying that India took advantage and did this. But they don't say anything about the civil war, and they don't say anything about what they did wrong. There has never been an official, I've been talking about it, apology to Bangladesh, nor one from Bangladesh to Biharis in West Pakistan is killed. This has never happened. So actually, there is no closure to this war. Okay, Siachen is the only war in which actually the Indians began it. General Chibber is the authority. He came and told us this in Islamabad. And actually, they are the losers because, in a sense, nobody is a winner here because it's a war in which the weather wins. But in this case, again, I have it from, and I've quoted an authority, an Indian authority, that the generals oppose withdrawal. Otherwise, there would have been withdrawal from India and Pakistan. Kargil, on the other hand, is once again a decision by a clique. You can see where this is the Siachen Glacier, and you can see that how, I mean, that's where it's a glacier at the moment. You can't get the rise of it. Okay, the occupation of the Kargil heights. Now, here are some heights, peaks, and the idea is that if you sit on these peaks, if Pakistanis sit on these peaks, then the heavy cannon, they can use heavy cannon to block the road, which goes all the way and supplies food as well as arms, ammunition, etc., to a whole division of the Indian Army up in Ladakh. So if we do that, one division will be less, and India will come to the negotiating table, or we can move up to Srinagar. We'll be so puffed up. Why? Because India is never going to cross the international border. That will mean war, and this time we've got nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons, instead of deterring war, now are actually being depended upon for creating a war. So the occupation Kargil Heights was planned by General Musharraf, then the chief of the army staff with Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmad, then the corps commander of 11 Division, Lieutenant General Muhammad Aziz Khan. The officer who executed was Major General Javed Hassan, field commander, northern areas, whose troops actually fought the war. Actually, they've been called, Naseem Zahra has written a very good book about it, From Kargil to the Coup, and she has called them many things, including a gang of four. I don't use those terms, but clique is a term. It's a clinical term. It's an exact term. It's not in any way to insult, etc. That's the term I use. These heights were lost when Musharraf, when Nawaz Sharif went to America. General Musharraf claimed later that the heights were not lost. Actually, they were. For evidence, I have brought the statement from the chief of the general staff of that time, Lieutenant General Shahid Aziz. That's what he says. Our several posts had not been seized by the enemy. Others have also fallen, which had not yet been reported to the GHQ. According to the normal custom of lying, false reports were generated. There was no counter plan to save more posts from falling. The morale of the troops had fallen. Now, to save the other posts from falling, there was only one way. And this is what he says, that this war should be further expanded in some other area of Kashmir so that the enemy should be forced to reduce its strength from Kargil. Well, not even General Musharraf bought that. So he was saved from at least that war. But anyway, this was how it was. That's how wrong it went. If you want to know about the planes you might be having in your mind, and why, because Pakistani troops were bombarded by Indian planes, whereas Pakistani planes stayed about 8 kilometers from their own area. That's because the Air Force was not involved. Secondly, because Pakistani planes, Indian planes were operating in their territory. Pakistani planes, on the other hand, were not going into the Indian territory. That's a transgression of that is more, that would, it's not the international border, of course, it's the line of control, but anyway, it would be considered a transgression of a major order. In any case, the Pakistan Air Force was not fully involved. And General Bukhari, Admiral Bukhari said, what is this war for? What for? So the whole armed forces were not on, and many in the army were also critical of it. And many officers in the GHQ, some of whom I've quoted, were critical of it. In short, the whole military command was not in it. It was a clique which had planned it and which had executed it. Low intensity operations, we are going to soon end. Well, there are two Afghan wars. In the first one, Ziaul Haq was there, and in this the Soviet Union had come in. But remember, it was not Ziaul Haq who started training Hikmat-i-Yar and such kind of people, Islamists. It was Mr. Bhutto. It was Mr. Bhutto who started doing it, and he trained. Hikmat-i-Yar was trained in Pakistan and others such people by military officers, of course, but during Mr. Bhutto's time. That was the word they use is needle. That was to bother the Afghan rulers. Ziaul Haq followed the same policy, and the same was happening. But then the Americans came in. The Americans never ordered Pakistan. They asked Pakistan, and Ziaul Haq said peanuts. He rejected the offer. Later on, he took the offer of much more money, and he said, the ISI is going to do everything. We are going to do everything. He didn't, of course, obviously mention the ISI. We are going to do everything. Your American foot on the ground will not be there. Second, we'll take it from the port, and we will use transport. So the army logistics cell was created. Our roads are much better because this money went into there. And of course, they would take this arms and ammunition, etc., store them. But other people have written exactly how it was done. Eventually, I mean, even these things were not returned. The ammunition depot here in Pindi blew up. So not even in the end. But General K.M. Arif writes that the Stinger missiles given to the Afghan fighters justified the need for training them, and this was given in ad hoc takes by the ISI with instructors provided by the army. He adds that the cabinet members knew that Pakistan was supporting the Afghan struggle, but the details were kept secret from civilian authorities. Again, it's a clique acting in this way and not the civilian government. No matter, I mean, it was a powerless government, but whatever it was, that government was not allowed to enter it. So the ISI's role has been given by an ISI officer, and he is the one who actually trained these people. His name is Brigadier Yusuf, and that's what he has written. According to Brigadier Yusuf in 1987, the percentage of allocation to these commanders were Hikmat-e 18 to 20%, Rabbani 18 to 19%, Sayaf 17 to 18%, Khalis 13 to 15%, Nabi 13 to 15%, Gilani 10 to 11%, Mujaddidi 3 to 5%, and so on. And most of these, as critics have pointed out, favored the Islamist radicals. Yusuf says it was based on military fighting strength, but whatever. Okay. So this actually defeated the Soviet Union. But this left a number of fighters, Islamist fighters, enthusiastic, highly committed, ideologically motivated on Pakistan's frontiers, the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Pakistan used some of them against India and some local people also, but that's the second treaty. When 9/11 happened and General Musharraf joined the Americans, etc., again being paid for it, the Taliban, the fighters started calling themselves Taliban a little later, but actually they started fighting the Pakistan army earlier. All the treaties which they made, they broke. As soon as they were powerful, they broke the treaties. There was tremendous confusion in Pakistan, there still is, because as soon as an explosion occurred, etc., our people would say on the radio, etc., that this was the work of Indian agents or Israeli agents or America or Blackwater. They wouldn't, although the Taliban said that they were responsible, but our people wouldn't say so, etc. And many of our ordinary soldiers thought that it was Pakistan which was wrong and the Taliban were right, and many of them went and left the army. So this fighting was extremely difficult. But yes, it did happen. Now, there were two ways of doing it. One was by choosing to eliminate the commanders, let's say, strategists. And that is what was accomplished by drones. America never violated Pakistan's borders or any of the orders which emanated from the state. For you this would be strange because everybody says otherwise. Not true. The corridors to those drones were given by the government of Pakistan, fully given by the Pakistan army, and they actually wanted the Taliban fighters, the heads, etc. They were not called Taliban in those days. They were called Al-Qaeda, to be eliminated, which did happen. The most, let's say, effective ones were eliminated, but at a cost. And the cost is, if one fighter dies, 10 innocent people die as what is called collateral damage. So 1 to 10. I mean, those 10 people died for nothing. And there was this death hovering on the skies in the travel areas also for a long time. So it's not that Pakistanis are entirely wrong. They're wrong about the violation and all that, but they are right about the human rights angle of it. There was a human rights angle to it, and Pakistanis don't talk about the human rights angle to it. They talk about violation, which was not true. Anyway, they didn't know any better. The second way of fighting is to use the army. Now, how do you use the army? You first soften up the target. That is to say, you either use Air Force bombing, Air Force planes, or you use cannon, and then the infantry goes in. But that means that the people should leave that area. This is the way it was done. That's what military action is. That's the way it was done in Swat, and later on it was done in other areas also, Waziristan and so on. But this means displacement at a huge scale, and Pashtuns were displaced at a huge scale, and that is one of the things which Pashtuns suffered a lot from. Pashtun women suffered a lot because there is the looking after children, cooking, and then there was the male gaze, people looking at them and ogling at them and so on. So all this happened, and all this Pashtun women had to endure, fighting with their husbands then, who would sort of blame them. So all this did happen. Okay, next one. The Eastern Front, as I said, these people were used on the Eastern Front. You have heard that none of these people came from Pakistan. Not true. This is a statement from Tariq Rehman. He was an IG. I interviewed him, but I have not taken the interview here. I've taken a book which you can read. Tariq Rehman, police officer, wrote that the terrorists were trained near Thatta. Casing to the explosive device were matched. The fishing trawler used for the voyage to India was brought back to the harbor, which was connected to the accused. Moreover, the number of the engine of the dinghy abandoned in Mumbai harbor by the attackers was traced back to imports from Japan to Karachi. Even the operation rooms used to direct the attackers was in Karachi, and the communication through voice over internet protocol were unearthed. Ambassador Shahid Malik, at that time Pakistan's ambassador to India, confirmed some of these facts. So actually, this is when Americans said that you are hunting with the sort of hounds, and you were running with the hare, and that you should do more, they were not wrong. So Barack Obama's report then is as follows. The report's added emphasis on Pakistan was the key. Not only did the Pakistan military, and in particular the ISI, tolerate the presence of Taliban headquarters and leadership in Quetta, near the Pakistan border, but it was also quietly assisting the Taliban as a means of keeping the Afghan government weak and hedging against Kabul's potential alignment with Pakistan's tribal India. Well, this has happened. The Taliban have come back. Women's rights have shrunk. If you think that's fine, that's all right. And I'm not concerned with your views. I'm concerned with the fact that this did happen. Pakistan wanted the Taliban to win. They knew that the Americans would leave one day or the other. They wanted the Taliban to win. And why? Because the other governments over there allowed Indians to set up different centers. All these centers, under diplomatic cover, were, so to speak, spying on Pakistan, or at least they were perceived to be spying on Pakistan, and they were so many of them. I once asked there was a conference, and I asked the ambassador of India, why don't you do this development in Bihar? You're doing it here. If you want friendship with Pakistan, you should put them at ease. And putting them at ease means not having these centers in Afghanistan at all, not having these consulates, they were called, in Afghanistan at all. But obviously, ambassadors don't reply to such things. So Pakistan did feel this. But if Pakistan had not fought its proxy war, despite this feeling, or if India had been wise enough not to have those consulates there, maybe then we would have the strengthened Afghan government and not the Taliban government over there. But anyway, Pakistan did sort of hunt with the hounds and did run with the hare. Okay, I'm about to finish because I can see that my time is way less. If you are interested, drones, the deaths are 3,231. As I said, one fighter and the rest 9 are innocent people. And the militancy, the deaths are 168,459. And you know how many innocent people there are here. because these are women and children also. So here it is. Conclusion. Decisions for initiating aggressive military action, which can and did precipitate wars, have been taken by a small clique of Pakistani decision makers. Except in the first Kashmir war, this has been composed of military officers, though some of them were also heads of states and government when the decisions were taken. That's one. Second, the decisions were inordinately risky and even put the state itself in jeopardy, and in all cases resulted in avoidable deaths, violence, and misery for the people of South Asia. The ideological assumptions behind them were that India will not retaliate, that non-state actors are controllable by the Pakistani state, that plausible deniability will not compromise the state, that the fallout of military action in Kashmir or elsewhere in India will be tolerable for Pakistan, and that Pakistanis are better fighters than Indians. All the above assumptions have been proved false. And we face the danger of a nuclear war if the above type of decision-making continues. As decisions by cliques are not questioned, examined by many stakeholders, or admitted to be wrong later, the peril of risky decision-making is a very real one. Thank you very much.
Going back to 65, like you said, Ayub was a soldier. No self-respecting field marshal would put up with a clique who would say, I've read Manstein and other German commanders, but you've got to have an overall assessment of the situation, and thinking that the Indians would not cross the international border is pure fallacy. And I've spoken to officers who fought at Khemkaran and also at Badapend in 71. And the control and command and control failures cannot be believed. And changing a commander you don't change horses midstream, Riaknoor. I mean, why was Akhtar Ali Malik suddenly removed from command and Yahya put in his place? And that caused a delay of 1 day, which was instrumental in the Indians stopping the attack. Even in the 71 in the desert. I'm sorry, sir, if I'm going on a bit.
Please.
That's what I'm saying. Why is this failure of command and control in the Pakistan army? Why this assessment? And in 1990s, there was other thing that we had defeated the Soviet Union by ourselves. So this sort of gambles, you can take gambles, obviously, but please, you should keep them some sort of realism when fighting an enemy.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I've been saying. Okay. See, what I've done in this book is to look at as much as possible documentary evidence or interview, etc. I tried to find out, although, I mean, battles was not my interest, but in this, since this was a point which has been asked by everybody, apart from speculation, there is nothing concrete about why the change of command took place in 1965. It did give a 24-hour window, which the Indians have written, as you rightly say, that they used it in order to, bring more guns and ammunition, etc., to save the place. Yes, absolutely. But why this happened is not clear. I mean, people come up with all kinds of speculations, including religion and so on and so forth. But absolutely no, there is even the order came in strange ways. Musa gave the order, but it was conveyed by Brigadier Azam. Yeah, I mean, that normally doesn't happen. And yes, not just a field marshal, but anybody would say that no foreign minister can guarantee that the border would not be crossed. It just does not make sense. Pure nonsense. So that is absolutely true. And failure otherwise in 1990, as I said, I mean, that's the gambling mind. That is the gambling mind. That's the point. That if one assumes that one thing has happened, so the other is also going to happen with a much bigger power in entirely different kind of situations. India's situation was very different from that of Afghanistan, which is tribe infested.
Thank you, sir. It was a very nice overview of all of the aspects. You are welcome. Sir, my basic, and I have only one question,
yes,
or you can say or two. The question is there is this about that nobody wants a peace? Because when Lal Bahadur Shastri, as you mentioned in your presentation, went to Russia for a peace territory after that was 65 war, the day he signed the treaty, the next day he was dead. And if I talk about recently that Imran Khan talked about Kashmir view and UN, then there was nobody was talking about or even were concerned about Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, that they were being uh, uh, in their houses and it was brutally occupied by Indians. And the third thing is that as you talk about that Taj Mahal, that it was basically a Mumbai attacks. So if Pakistan is doing something to India, so what is your stake about that India is doing with Balochistan, that terror financing and all that? Thank you.
Okay, right. So, Lal Bahadur Shastri, the death is by heart. You know, he had a heart failure. So no, nothing else. Everything else is pure conspiracy theory. The doctors have confirmed it. Everybody has. Lal Bahadur Shastri actually gave Haji Pir Pass back to Pakistan. That was a peace measure. Haji Pir, just sir, one moment. Haji Pir Pass had been captured by the Indian Army with great effort. He did that. He couldn't obviously do Kashmir. He told Ayub Khan, which I've given in my book, that Kashmir ke baare mein main Sadr Sahab aapki koi khidmat nahi kar sakta. But Haji Pir Pass he did give. And it's pure conspiracy to think that he was killed by somebody. Of course, he wasn't killed by anybody.
I'm really very sorry, लेकिन जो दो डॉक्टर्स जो रशिया के थे, उनके साइन नहीं थे उनके डेथ सर्टिफिकेट के ऊपर.
This is pure conspiracy theory. Everything else about Imran Khan, etc. I mean, if you want to ask me a question, was Pakistan ever a client state? It was never a client state. And I can give that. If you have time, you can listen to my answer. Pakistan has never behaved like a client state, has never been a client state. And nobody, not Zulfikar Ali Bhutto or anybody, has been killed because of one thing or the other. Nor has Imran Khan's government been removed because of any such thing as the Americans don't like it. This part is part of conspiracy theories. I can give a longer answer. Thank you. Balochistan, of course, India is doing things in Balochistan. They do that. All intelligence agencies always do that. Pakistan has been doing things in order for the Maoists to bring them up against the state of India and the Sikhs. And India has been doing it in Balochistan and elsewhere as states too. That is the Cold War. It was the hot war we have been, of course, talking about, not the Cold War. But there is no doubt that India is doing such things. And there is also no doubt that Pakistan would do the same. Yeah.
Online, Shahid Mahmood, go ahead. Shahid,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saab. Just one or two observations. Thank you for the very nice go through of a brief go through of the history. मैं दो चीजें कहना चाहूँगा. One, these are observations. Pakistan Army and its armed forces, especially Army, my interaction with them tells me that they remain completely unrepentant. Given their mistakes, if you mention it to them, they remain completely, they just ignore that. वो कहते हैं जी नहीं ये कोई नहीं. For example, if you mention Kargil to them, and the first thing that they'll tell you कि जी वो नवाज शरीफ जो है अगर वो ना करता तो हमने तो बस game जीत ली थी. So this kind of mindset still prevails. There has been no change to it. Second, they still believe that we are much better than the Indian Army, and this is at general level. Talk to them, and they believe that they are better soldiers than the
question
Indian.
पे आ जाएं, question पे.
ठीक है सर. नहीं सर, मेरी observation. And third one, sir, it is highly unlikely that they'll learn anything. ठीक है, because there is no accountability mechanism in the country for that.
ठीक है, okay.
बिल्कुल ठीक है. I mean, this is very well known. वही मैंने कहा है कि इससे learning नहीं हुई है, और उसकी learning इसलिए नहीं हुई है कि actually जो questioning एक होती है institutional questioning, you know, स्टाफ कॉलेज में, एनडीयू में, फिर उधर, और विच इज वेरी वेल नोन एटसेट्रा, तो वो तो नहीं हुई है ना. सो यस, ऑर्डिनरी आर्मी ऑफिसर, यू राइट अबाउट इट, वो यही सोचते होंगे.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. My name is Manzoor Ahmed. I'm really, although I read a lot, but some of the things were eye-opening for me as well from your lecture. What I wonder is that, I mean, you know, we hear that there's very little tolerance for such views. And I wondered, it may be a personal question, but nothing. I mean, you were not really warned or anything, and okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm so far happily that everything is all right. Yeah, so far, so good. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
सर फिजा मोहम्मद डेवलपमेंट स्टडीज PIDE सर मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि just like you mentioned that especially after 65-71 रेसिज्म एक बहुत बड़ा इशू मतलब था तो पहले से ही लेकिन विजिबल होने लग गया और उसकी इफेक्ट्स भी होने लग गए. माय क्वेश्चन इज डू यू थिंक इट वुड बी फेयर टू से कि अब हम क्योंकि रेसिज्म अब भी एग्जिस्ट करता है और इसके इकोनॉमिक सोशल पॉलिटिकल कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस भी हैं, तो हम स्कूल्स पे और उसमें इसको एज एन इशू ऑफ पाकिस्तान लें कि टू डील विद रेसिज्म राइट फ्रॉम द रूट कॉज सो दैट इट डजंट हर्ट अस एनी मोर बिकॉज इट्स स्टिल देयर, इट्स एवरीवेयर इन द कंट्री. और इस जिस तरह पहले हो चुका है शायद उस तरह के इफेक्ट्स बाद में फिर भी आए इस तरह की चीजें. तो मतलब जो रेसिस्ट एक वो है इसको या हमने इस वक्त कम फोकस किया है एज इन आवर एजुकेशन सिस्टम एटसेट्रा, हमें ज्यादा करना चाहिए था.
Absolutely, racism has always been an issue. लेकिन yes, उसको फोकस और डील नहीं किया गया है. Racism is not the only thing. Minorities के साथ सारी ट्रीटमेंट्स और भी तो खराब है, चाहे वो कौन सी मिनॉरिटीज हो, रिलीजियस मिनॉरिटीज हो, LGBT हो, यानी कोई भी हो, वो ट्रीटमेंट तो हमारे नहीं है ना. मतलब ट्रांसजेंडर के साथ तो वो तो सारी मिनॉरिटीज के साथ है, तो वो बात तो ठीक है. और फॉर दैट मैटर सिर्फ मिनॉरिटी नहीं बल्कि हमारी जो मेजॉरिटी है वो गरीब लोगों की है, किसान लोगों की है, तो उनके साथ ट्रीटमेंट कौन सी अच्छी होती है? वो तो मिनॉरिटी नहीं है ना. अच्छा, जेंडर के अंदर खवातीन तो वो भी मिनॉरिटी नहीं, बराबर की हैं, उनके साथ ट्रीटमेंट कौन सी अच्छी होती है? और एलिट कैप्चर की लिखते रहते हैं नदीम हक साहब और आप लोग ज्यादा जानते हैं. और एलिट कैप्चर का मतलब तो यही है ना कि ज्यादातर लोगों को जो मेजॉरिटी है एक्चुअली उनको डिप्राइव किया जाए और एलिट के पास सब कुछ हो. तो वो तो हमारे यहाँ है, सिर्फ माइनॉरिटी क्वेश्चन नहीं है. डिस्क्रिमिनेशन इन वेरियस फॉर्म्स एंड एक्सप्लॉयटेशन इन वेरियस फॉर्म्स इज सर्टेनली देयर. I must also add that it's all over the world. It's just a question of more or less, but it's definitely there. Perhaps the US is leading in this. So ये तो जरूर है, and we should do something about it, of course.
महमूद खालिद साहब बोलिए.
Sir, thank you very much. Sir, small quick questions. कारगिल वॉर में सर मैं स्कर्दू में स्टेशन था. वहां पे मुजाहिदीन वर पार्क्ड इन स्कर्दू सिटी एंड एनएलआई वाज फाइटिंग इन द टॉप एंड वी वर नॉट अलाउड टू डिसेमिनेट दिस इंफॉर्मेशन एट दैट टाइम. लेकिन सर अब इन द प्रेजेंट डे अब तो हम सैटेलाइट पे सॉरी चाइनीज और इंडियन फाइटर्स को बाय हैंड भी फाइट करते देखते हैं. यूक्रेन रशिया जो वॉर है, एवरीथिंग इज नाउ नोन. तो व्हाट इन योर सेंस वुड बी द फ्यूचर ऑफ सच वॉर्स के जिसमें विनिंग the first जो attack है and who is basically doing what is known to everybody. ये सर पहला. Second sir, इस सारी discussion में where does the role of the international organizations such as the UN and other watchdogs which are basically there to see कि who's aggressor and who's basically the victim, इनका क्या role होगा या रहा है in terms of resolving the crisis or maybe fueling it? Thank you sir.
Okay, very good. Yes, look, satellites can look at movement, right? Satellites will not tell you whether those people who are wearing some kind of baggy trousers are soldiers or some other kind of fighters. So non-state actors can still be used. Ek to ye hai. Secondly, role of the UN. Role of the UN the UN doesn't have an army. You see, it borrows its forces from others. And as long as the whole world does not have armies, and only the UN has armies, one division from every country or something like that, it's not going to have any really effective role. वो नहीं possible है. Russia को क्या कर लिया? Putin को क्या कर लिया अभी? That was an actual attack on another country. What could they do about it? Nothing really. So ये नहीं होता. ठीक है, वो तो NATO कर रहा है ना, और NATO जो कर रहा है वो सप्लाइंग ऑफ वेपन्स वगैरह से कर रहा है. कि यूएन ने कहीं रोकी तो नहीं है ना, जंग को रोक भी नहीं सकते. So that sort of thing is as yet Pakistan, I mean not Pakistan, but the whole world is like a state which is unpoliced. If the world is, you consider that a state, वो unpoliced है. UN वगैरह बेकार चीजें. They are effective only if you are powerless. Then at some time they come up with some resolutions and all. Resolutions कौन से उनके obey होते हैं? कश्मीर वाला कौन सा obey होंगे? नेहरू ने एक खत के अंदर लिखा है कि really didn't mean to do it. तो ये तो है ना, obey वगैरह कौन करता है? They don't have power.
थैंक यू वेरी मच तारिक साहब, वंडरफुल. मैं सिर्फ इतना कहूंगा कि आप एक किताब लिखें सिविलियन साइड पे भी, बिकॉज मेरा ख्याल प्रॉब्लम वहां भी यही है. आई मीन द क्लिक्स एंड स्मॉल नॉन ट्रांसपेरेंट पॉलिसी मेकिंग. मर्जी आई तो ये बना दिया, मर्जी आई तो वो बना दिया, मर्जी आई तो एहसास प्रोग्राम कर दिया, मर्जी आई तो ये कर दिया. किसी को नहीं पता चलता कैसे हुआ है, क्या हुआ है. तो मेरा ख्याल ये हमारी कौम की रीत ही है पूरी. बट द होल वर्ल्ड ओवर, obviously decision making is always in a small club, but there are mechanisms by which these things become transparent, and the watchdogs like think tanks etc talk about it. Unfortunately, our universities don't play that role. Our universities are dead, and our universities, for example, don't even hold seminars and webinars jo main rota rehta hu ki kam se kam wohi kar le. So there's no real check on policy. Media sirf karta hai, but media, as you know, media is not capable of doing it. Media ko sirf वो मंडे मॉर्निंग क्वार्टरबैकिंग होती है कि बस सुबह को कुछ कर लिया, शाम तक भूल जाते हैं. तो आई डोंट नो व्हाट इट विल टेक. तो आई वुड अर्ज यू कि आप सिविलियन साइड पे भी कुछ करके हमें बताएं कि यहाँ भी इस साइड पे भी बहुत क्लिकिश छोटी छोटी ग्रुप्स होते हैं, किचन कैबिनेट्स होती है. इवन कैबिनेट में बात नहीं आती. बात वही है जो मिलिट्री साइड पे भी है. और जो यहाँ गलतियां हुई हैं उन गलतियों का भी हमें कुछ बता दें, क्योंकि बहुत गलती हुई है. हमारा जो 80% ऑफ जीडीपी डेट है, जिसकी वजह से आज हम डिफॉल्ट के सिर पे बैठे हुए हैं, जिसकी वजह से पता नहीं क्या हो जाएगा, आई एम वेरी वरिड, वो भी तो इसी वजह से आया. तो दिस इज अनदर वॉर दैट वी आर फाइटिंग, एंड इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द स्टूपिड डिसीजन मेकिंग दैट हैज हैपेंड without any check at all.
बिल्कुल ठीक कहा आपने सारी चीज. अच्छा, I myself will probably may not be able to write another book. I have, however, written a book on Ghalib. ये गालिब का पूरा दीवान है, जिसके लिए हर शेर के उर्दू में जो अल्फाज हैं उनके इंग्लिश में मायने समझाएं और फिर वो इंग्लिश में कमेंट्री है. ये है, दिस इज प्रॉब्ली माय लास्ट बुक. अब सेहत इस काबिल नहीं रही कि इसके अलावा कुछ लिखा जाए. अच्छा, बाय द वे, वन थिंग आई शुड टेल यू बिफोर यू गो, ऑन दिस बुक आई डू नॉट गेट अ पेनी. तो ये जाता है फोलियो के पास. Folio has been kind enough to publish it. ये राउटलेस की किताब है, which is $180 or something. तो वो यहाँ जाहिर है कि अगर आएगी भी, even the paperback is $60. तो उनकी इजाजत से फोलियो ने पब्लिश की है, लेकिन ये पायरेट हो गई. तो फोलियो ने मुझे ये कहा था कि बता दें कि पायरेट जो हुई है वो 600 रुपए की मिलती है, उनको बेइंतहा नुकसान आया क्योंकि लोग पायरेटेड किताब खरीद रहे हैं. So this, whatever money you spend is going to Folio, not to me.
To remain alive.
You know, I just wanted to make this clear. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. It's a pleasure, and I think it's an excellent audience. And Ghalib वाली तो शायद आप पसंद नहीं करेंगे. वो जब
नहीं,
भी
क्यों नहीं
आएगी
जी,
तो
जब भी आएगी जरूर.
जब भी आएगी.
तारिक साहब, मैं ये कह दूं कि you are one of our best scholars. So you're always welcome at PIDE. We have a tradition in Pakistan. That's another book that's probably worth writing. We have a tradition in Pakistan, Abdul Salam being the key, we don't value our scholars. Part of the tradition is we don't value our scholars.
You have always done that. And the diversity आपके जो seminars के मैं देखता हूँ.
नहीं, it's our duty.
बहुत सारा.
It's not something that we. It's our duty.
लोग ये तो नहीं कराते कि इस पे भी करा दे, उस पे भी नहीं कराते. वो तो उनका ख्याल होता है एक छोटी सी चीज पे. पाइट पे हमारा ख्याल था इकोनॉमिक्स के अलावा कुछ नहीं होगा. Frankly, पहले यही ख्याल था मेरा. When this happened, I was actually surprised, very pleasantly surprised. अच्छा, now here is someone who's, पहले तो जब इन्होंने मुझे कहा कि मैंने दिल में कहा मैं कहाँ से फेलो बनूं, इकोनॉमिक तो एक लफ्ज नहीं आता, मैं क्या फेलो बनूं. तो खैर मैंने 2-4 किताबें पढ़ी हुई थी. मैंने कहा कि चलो इतना है कि अगर वो कुछ बात कहेंगे तो शायद थोड़ी सी पल्ले भी पड़ जाए. तो इतना था. फिर मैंने कहा वो तो ग्राफ श्राफ की बातें करेंगे, हमारे कौन से पल्ले पड़ने लगी. लेकिन चलो खैर कह रहे हैं तो वो ठीक है. तो वो हो गया. अब उसके बाद मैं बड़ा हैरान कि ये तो हर तरह की चीज को बोल.
Intellectual tradition तो ऐसे ही बनती है ना जी. Intellectual tradition is creating a national conversation, and this is something we failed. We've totally failed at that.
No, but then you are.
Thank you very much for keeping. No, thank you very much for keeping us supplied with excellent research all your life. Thank you, sir. Khuda Hafiz.